Welcome back. All right, so team history video today. I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins. Penguins, of course, came in 1967 as part of the first expansion of the modern era by the National Hockey League. And so you had 6 teams in the original six, and you had the 6 teams in the expansion side of things. Pittsburgh was not one of the more successful teams, and there was a lot of discussion about whether or not Pittsburgh might be in trouble. These discussions continued up until they drafted Mario Lemieux, and they reared their head again after Mario Lemieux retired, to the point where Mario says, fine, I'll own the team and then we won't be moving. So Mario Lemieux is the savior of this team twice over, and of course Crosby helped out as well, in that he's been a fantastic piece to build around since he was drafted first overall. Mario Lemieux, though, is number one on the list. He was a first overall pick as well. 915 games played, 690 goals, 1,033 assists, 1,723 points. If you want to do a hockey what if New Jersey finished at the bottom of the standings that year and they were close and they had drafted Lemieux instead, and if Muller had gone to Pittsburgh, would the Penguins still be the Penguins? It's a valid question because back then there was a lot of issues. Crosby, 1,108 games played with Pittsburgh, 517 goals, 892 assists, 1,409 points. So look for Crosby to get his 900th career assist pretty soon after the season gets started. Malkin's third on the board, 981 games played, so he'll be playing game 1,000 as a Penguin this year. 444 goals, 702 assists, 1,146 points. And the only thing that I think has held back Malkin, there's two things with Malkin that have held him back from being seen as one of the best all time. One, he plays under the shadow that is Sidney Crosby, and two, he does get injured a lot. He misses a lot of games. He'd be up around that 1,100 game mark too, or even higher, because Crosby's missed a lot of games too. So Malkin, if he can stay healthy, that's huge for them this year. Yager's number 4 on the board, 806 games played, 439 goals, 640 assists, 1,079 points for Yager. Chris Letang, 941 games played, 144 goals, 506 assists, 650 points. Letang has played for a long time. He's going to reach that 1,000th game this coming season as well as a Penguin. And so that core, all three of them should have that 1,000 game mark under their belt once this coming season's done. That's huge. You don't see that a lot in the National Hockey League. Rick Kehoe. I'm old enough to remember when Rick Kehoe was number 1 on this list. 722 games played, 312 goals, 324 assists, 636 points. Rick Kehoe was a leader for this team when it wasn't run very well. Not Kehoe's fault, but he kind of gets forgotten in response. I think I've done a Rick Kehoe career video. If I haven't, I'm going to have to definitely make sure that I get that done. Ron Francis is next on the board, played 533 games in Pittsburgh, 164 goals, 449 assists, 613 points for Francis. Jean Pronovost, 753 games played, 316 goals, 287 assists, 603 points. Played for them during the 70s and played well. Kevin Stevens, 522 games, 260 goals, 295 assists, 555 points. One of the best power forwards I've ever watched is Kevin Stevens. And then you got Apps, 495 games, 151 goals, 349 assists, 500 points. So it takes 500 points to crack the top 10 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's pretty good. That's a pretty good top 10 list right there. There's some Hall of Famers in there. And so, yeah, not too bad of a list. Wins leaders all time. Marc-Andre Fleury, 375 wins. Tom Barrasso, 226. Matt Murray, 117. Ken Reggett, 104. Tristan Jarry with 93. Should be passing Reggett soon enough. Ken Reggett, underrated goaltender while he was in Pittsburgh. That's why I have a Ken Reggett 8x10 on my wall here, because I thought he was underrated during his time there. Retired numbers, not very many considering this team's won 5 Stanley Cups, but I think that's going to change soon enough. Number 66 for Mario Lemieux, and I don't think anybody in the league will ever wear that again. And the number 21 for Michel Briere. He had a car crash after his rookie season. He passed away as a result of that car crash, so they retired his number. Yager's 68 has to be retired. I think you can make an argument for Kevin Stevens' number being retired. You can make an argument for Ron Francis. And then when Letang, Malkin, and Crosby retire, all three of those numbers should come out of circulation. It is remarkable how well Pittsburgh has managed to manage the retired numbers. Some teams, I think, have too many, in all likelihood. In this case, I would argue they probably don't have quite enough. Maybe they're too frugal with their numbers, but again, the 2 numbers that have been retired make total sense. Playoffs. This is a team that makes the playoffs a lot. And the question becomes one of, are they building towards another Stanley Cup, or are they just holding on and eventually they're going to be outside of the playoffs? In 2000, they lost in the second round against Philadelphia. That was in 6 games. In 2001, they lost in the conference final against the New Jersey Devils. That was in 5 games. 2007, so there's that in between there where things were bad, but they drafted Malkin, they drafted Crosby, turned out pretty well. 2007, they lost in the first round against Ottawa. That was in 5. 2008, they lost in the Stanley Cup final against Detroit in 6 before winning the Stanley Cup in 2009. If they'd beaten Detroit in 2008, that would mean that Pittsburgh had only won back-to-backs. They'd never just won one Stanley Cup, so close in 2008. 2010, they lost in the second round against Montreal. That was in 7 games. 2011, they lost in the first round against Tampa. That was in 7 games. And, of course, the Montreal one, that's during the Jaro Halak run, right? 2012, they lost in the first round against Philadelphia. That was in 6. 2013, they lost in the conference final against Boston. That was 4 straight. As a Bruins fan, I did enjoy that. I'm not going to lie. 2014, they lost in the second round against the Rangers in 7. And in 2015, they lost in the first round against the Rangers again, this time in 5. And the conversation in 2015 was one of how Pittsburgh was a really good regular season team, but they hadn't won a Stanley Cup in 6 years. Maybe it's time to change things up. 2016, they proved they didn't really need to change much. They won a Stanley Cup then, and they won it again in 2017. So back-to-back Stanley Cups, both of them very impressive runs by Pittsburgh. 2018, they lost in the second round against Washington in 6. If they got past Washington, we know Washington won the Stanley Cup in 2018. We might have been looking at 3-time Stanley Cup champions in a row for the Pittsburgh Penguins. A record that we now know we're not going to see equaled. The last team to do that was the New York Islanders, who won their 3rd in 1982 out of 4 that they won that 4th in 83. So 2019, they lost in the first round against the Islanders. That was in 4 straight. 2020, they lost the qualifying round against Carey Price and the Montreal Canadiens, 3-1. 2021, they lost in the first round. It's the Islanders again, this time in 6. And this past year, 2022, they had a 3-1 series lead against the Rangers. Could not hold it. Lost in 7 games against the New York Rangers. So for Pittsburgh, it has been first round losses, or in the case of 2020, qualifying round loss, ever since the 2018 second round loss against Washington that was right after their 2 straight Stanley Cups. So they really are a feast or famine team, although playoffs, yeah, you can basically pencil them in for playoffs every year. And we'll see when that changes. But at this point, yeah, there's still playoffs every year. Stanley Cup years, 1991, 1992, and then the 3 you see here, 2009, 2016, and 2017. So they're very good at winning back-to-backs. We'll see if they still have a back-to-back in them before Crosby, Malkin, Letang, before that era is done. Their arena is PPG Paints Arena. It's one of the more, I don't know if bland's the right word for it, but it's not a name that really inspires you and makes you think that's the name of a hockey arena. It's odd. Their coaching history, they've had 22 coaches. It started with Red Sullivan, who had a record of 47, 79, and 24, and their current coach is Mike Sullivan, so they're bookmarked by Sullivans. 297, 156, and 54 record for Sullivan. He's been very good behind the bench. There are some calls here and there about whether or not he should still be the coach, but he's still the coach. First goal in the team's history was scored by Andy Bathgate at 7:06 of the 3rd period in a 2-1 loss against the Montreal Canadiens, so it was a close one. Their most recent goal scored by Evan Rodriguez at 17:24 of the 2nd period in what would be a 4-3 overtime loss against the New York Rangers. So that Game 7, they pushed it, just could not get that winning goal. Their all-time penalty minutes leader, Kevin Stevens, 1,048. I'm kind of surprised there isn't a penalty minutes leader with the Penguins of 2,000 penalty minutes, just because they were around in the 70s and 80s when everybody was getting penalty minutes. Their season records, well, Mario Lemieux basically owns this. 85 goals in 88-89, 114 assists in 88-89, 199 points in 88-89. So close to 200, but Wayne Gretzky's still the only player who's broken 200 points in a single NHL season. Penalty minutes, Paul Baxter, 409 penalty minutes in 81-82. That's why I'm saying I'm surprised Stevens is still the all-time leader, because I remember Baxter, tough customer, and yeah, 409 penalty minutes. So he knew what he was there to do. The wins in a season, Tom Barrasso with 43 and 92-93. 92-93 was a great season, but they were not able to get that third straight Stanley Cup when they failed in the second round against New York Islanders, a team that has knocked them out a few times, right? So, yeah. Their best draft picks, 1988 drafting 67th overall, they draft Mark Recchi. He turned out to be pretty good, have a nice long career. 2005 drafting 62nd, they draft Chris Letang. 110th overall in 1987, they draft Sean McEachern, who had a nice long career himself. Drafting 102nd in 1977, they draft Greg Millen. Nice long career as a goaltender. Patrick Lalime was their 156th pick in 1993. He, of course, had some awesome masks, so I put him on the board. Then first-round picks that played less than 100 games. Not a lot, considering they've been drafting since 67. And their 67 number 2 overall pick is the first name on the board. It was Steve Rex, who did not play a single game in the NHL. 1968 drafting 4th, they draft Gary Swain. He played 9 games in the National Hockey League. 1975 drafting 13th overall, they draft Gord Laxton. He played 17 games in the NHL. Drafting 26th in 1993, they drafted Stefan Bergquist, who played 7 games in the NHL prior to that. Number 16 overall in 1984 was Roger Belanger, who played 44 games in the NHL. 1996, drafting 23rd overall, they went with goalie Craig Hillier. Did not play a game in the NHL. And I remember some hype with Hillier that year, too. 1997, drafting 17th overall, Robert Domingue was expected to be a pretty good player. He ended up playing 53 games in the NHL. 2007, drafting 20th overall, they draft Angelo Esposito, who had been seen as maybe a number 1 draft pick at one point in that draft year. And he just dropped so fast down the charts. It was seen as an effort problem. He never did reach the NHL. So there you go. He was one of those rare losses that they got after Crosby was drafted. Pretty good at the draft table since then. That's the only first-round pick since the turn of the century that hasn't played 100 games or more, other than players who are young and still have a chance to reach that 100-game mark. So there you go. The history of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.